everybody, and welcome into Last Call, the sports show where we basically just go over all the different levels of sports. UINDY Sports, college football, NFL football, and we just go through all the different levels of sports. And
it's a sports show. Shut up and watch.
Thank you, Jake. Today we're going to go over UINDY's football and their win against Tiffin last week. We're going to talk about men's soccer, women's soccer, and their game yesterday against McKendree. Talk about volleyball and tennis a little bit at the UINDY level. Then we're going to branch off and talk about all of Division I college football. Talk about some Indiana schools, how they did. Then we're going to switch gears into the NFL. We'll recap everything that happened yesterday and preview what's going on tonight on Monday Night Football. It should be an exciting show. Nathaniel Finch here with Jake Keefer. You're going to hear from Sam Gailey in a little bit, but let's jump right into it with this UINDY football game and what was a fantastic win for Indianapolis against Tiffin.
Yeah, just an unbelievable comeback. UINDY hadn't scored since the second quarter up until the fourth quarter. You know, Jeremiah Lee opens up the game with a 98-yard kickoff return for a touchdown. Anthony Lowe comes back for Tiffin on the very next play with the same type of play. You know, it's very back and forth until about the second quarter when Tiffin went up 20-7 after halftime. I mean, the Hounds would not score again until the fourth quarter when Kamal Ransom actually stays on his freshman tour tear.
And then the game-winning touchdown is the one you see here. The go-ahead score that Conor Kennett threw to Frank Bentley was an amazing way to go ahead. They kicked that PAT to go up 21-20, and then insult to injury on that ensuing kickoff with just 6 seconds left, and ended up winning 27-20. Was a great win for the Greyhounds.
Yeah, got to give credit to KJ Roudbush for not quitting when he very well could have on the play and picking up that lateral and scooping and scoring to make it 27-20. And of course, the Hounds lost last year in a comeback fashion to Tiffin. Kind of turned the page.
How about Kamal Ransom? This is his second game as a Greyhound. He's a freshman receiver. Third score already through the air. He's been a pretty impressive start as a rookie. Someone that the coaches really loved during training camp. He's the real deal. That's what Coach Keefer has said. He's the real deal.
He's got size. He's a red zone target. He's the type of guy you want to get the ball in the red zone because he's so big and so athletic. He's athletic enough to jump up and get it.
The Greyhounds lost to Tiffin last year. I know we touched on it a little bit, blew that big lead. They were the ones that gave up the comeback, and that's kind of what sent their season into a spiral. They lost a couple games straight after that. Lost to Lindenwood and Ohio Dominican. Couldn't really find any success. After that Tiffin loss, it was almost a season-ending heartbreaker for them. They fell out of the rankings, really struggled. This year's a different story, though. They were ranked 19 coming into the game. You got to imagine they're going to vault up that coach's poll now with this win. They're going to play an Ohio Dominican team this Saturday that they could very well have a good chance of defeating, given that Tiffin defeated Ohio Dominican last week. But really, this could just be the big difference. Last year they lost. This year they get the win, and it could be the momentum they need going into conference play in a couple weeks.
Well, I mean, it's all about momentum of the season and keeping the game flow going. And these first two wins in convincing fashion for the Hounds, especially against Tiffin, being able to get knocked down, per se, and get right back up and keep dealing blows to the opposing team. It's very encouraging.
How about Conor Kennett? Had himself a great day through the air, but also on the ground. Tell me a little bit about him.
I mean, through the air, 13 for 39, not a very impressive completion percentage, but 190 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. He hasn't thrown a pick yet this season. I'm going to go ahead and knock on wood here to make sure that doesn't happen this weekend against Ohio Dominican. We'll get to that later. Of course, on the ground, Kennett, 10 attempts, 128 yards with a long of 55. I mean, he took some hits in that game, and it sounds cliche, but he got right back up. There was one hit I remember in general. I thought that was the end of it for him when he got his helmet knocked off, and the defender who hit him's helmet was knocked off. But he got up no problems and kept trucking.
And for the standards of Toriano Clinton, a Harlan Hill candidate this year, was a finalist last year. Only had 18 carries, 81 yards. Not his best day on the ground. Still a great day for most Division II running backs, but
yeah.
It wasn't his best day. He was quote-unquote contained because he didn't have those giant gains. He only had 81 yards instead of the 100, 200 yards that we're used to seeing him on the ground. It seemed like it was almost necessity for Kennett to use his legs and scamper and get those extra yardage when it really mattered.
I mean, he had to. The pocket broke down quite a bit during the course of the game, and he read that very well, and he escaped and threw some passes on the run. He escaped and went ahead and took off and picked up 20, 30, 40 big chunk plays for the Greyhounds in the absence of Clinton, who, as you said, quote-unquote, had a rough game, and by any other standards, that'd be a great game.
Right.
If I could go out there and give you 81 yards I would say that's a good day.
And don't get us wrong, we're not saying that he had a poor game. It was Toriano Clinton. We're just used to seeing more from him, and it's not his fault. This is a testament to the defense really trying to hone in on stopping Toriano Clinton from gaining anything, and yet somehow he still was able to manage 4.5 yards a carry. Got 81 yards. It was a pretty impressive day, just not what we're used to seeing. It was still a great game for him, and the fact that Tiffin's defense really honed on stopping him opened up those lanes for everybody else.
Absolutely. Notable stats for Tiffin as well. Darius Penix, 14 attempts, 123 yards, 1 touchdown. He looked good last year against UIndy and looked to improve upon that this year. Anthony Lowe, a return TD, as mentioned earlier, 11 receptions, 100 yards. I mean, what more can you want from a guy that caliber? And then the transfer from FCS Merrimack, Christian Carter, 22 for 41, 208 yards, 1 interception, so didn't really find the end zone on the receiving end of his passes, but looked good through the air.
Greyhounds play Ohio Dominican this Saturday in what should be a great game and one that is very attainable to win before you head into conference play the week after.
Yeah, ODU's coming off a loss to Tiffin last week, 28-13 during UIndy's bye week. Notable stats there, Jake Bird, the quarterback, and wide receiver Ty Wiley are continuing to expand upon their previous year performances. Ty Wiley had 9 receptions, 139 yards, 1 touchdown, while Bird threw for 294 yards and 2 touchdowns and 1 pick. So
the Greyhounds moved to 2-0 on this early season. Let's shift gears. We're going to move away from UIndy football. Let's talk about UIndy soccer. We're going to go to Sam Gailey, who's on our set here for UIndy TV. Tell us about how the men's soccer game went.
Hey guys, how are you guys doing today? So the men's soccer unfortunately dropped to a 25 after a draw against McKendree that ended 1-1, a goal by Ibo Yilmaz, as we can show that for you right here. But unfortunately, that also goes down as a draw on their record, as now Indianapolis sits at a 2-1-2. And unfortunately, 0-1-1 in the conference play. Unfortunately for them, they need to improve that going into this week. I think they know it. I think everyone knows it. The women's soccer also drew versus McKendree, ironically, as a goal by Kiki Salceda to equalize against another penalty kick, actually, to make it 1-1. Fun fact about McKendree, as the women drew against them, McKendree was ranked number 15 in the nation, so this could be a great upside to the University of Indianapolis women's soccer. Moving on to UIndy women's volleyball, they lost 2-3 against McKendree, 70 points to 88 points. It was a tight game, but some incredible stats here coming at you. University of Indianapolis's Sarah Spalding had 20 assists, but unfortunately for her, McKendree's counterpart had 59 assists. Amber Williams put up a great performance on the stat sheet and on the court, which was quite impressive. Moving on to men's tennis, they were very successful in their doubles, in their A doubles. They move on to the quarterfinals and they move on to the semifinals. Actually played here tonight, or they play here on Monday. Unfortunately, the men's single tennis didn't go as planned, as one person lost out in the round of 16 and another person lost out in the quarterfinals, unfortunately. But overall, there's hope for the UIndy men's tennis team going into the quarterfinals and semifinals. Guys, back to you.
Thank you so much, Sam. Looking around to some Division I scores, Nathaniel, your Boilermakers went into a 2-0 Syracuse and kind of had a tough time.
It's been a rough start to the season for Purdue. They're going to fall to 1-2 on the year after losing to Syracuse 32-29. Get another close game. Both of their losses have come within a field goal, and it's not quite the start you wanted for Purdue. They're still a promising season, though, and against Syracuse, had themselves still a pretty good game. Both teams combined for 42 points in the fourth quarter. It was a slow start. It's kind of a theme for a lot of college and NFL games this last weekend. Slow start, but as soon as that fourth quarter hit, man, they were off and running, and Purdue really was able to control quite a bit of the game. Aiden O'Connell had himself a great game, but meanwhile ended up throwing a pick six that kind of shifted things in the fourth quarter, gave the ball to Syracuse. They scored, and it was just kind of rough to get back in the game from there.
Yeah, you touched on Aiden O'Connell, season highs in completions and yards, 39 of 56 for 424 yards, 3 touchdowns, and of course that pick six, as you mentioned. What about him, the duo of him and Charlie Jones, who kind of have a little bit of chemistry built up?
Jones has been an incredible player since transferring to Purdue. He's had that previous chemistry with O'Connell already, playing back in high school, and now that they're reunited here at Purdue, having himself a great start. He's only one of 5 Power 5 players in the history of college football that have 100-plus yards and a touchdown in each of their first 3 starts with the school. It's been a pretty impressive start for Charlie Jones, to say the least. But for Purdue, no excuses here. You were up by 4 with under a minute left, and Syracuse was just able to march their way down the field and score that game-winning touchdown. And really a big part of it was because of penalties. 13 penalties, 144 yards on the game. A lot of those coming in that final drive, a lot of it aiding the drive extension throughout the end of the game, and just not something that you can win games with.
So with that, Syracuse moves to 3-0 on the season. Purdue down to 1-2. Really, they had a couple winnable games in the past 2 before this one. What are your thoughts there, Nathaniel?
It's just not quite the start that we were hoping for as Boilermaker fans. Let's shift gears, though. Let's talk about that team down in Bloomington, undefeated.
Undefeated, but probably should be 0-3. Western Kentucky came to Bloomington to take on the Hoosiers. IU won in a barn burner, 33-30 in overtime. Of course, 17 fourth-quarter points is what sent the game to overtime. So Western Kentucky was up quite big numbers before IU started their comeback. Now, Connor Bazelak, the transfer quarterback from Missouri, 33 for 55, 364 yards, 2 touchdowns. Not an excellent performance completion-wise, but he really did step up big, and he had against Idaho and in previous games, so he's kind of filling a role for the Hoosiers.
Did a good job in crunch time, really making those plays that mattered. Got the game-winning field goal in overtime. Really, they've just done a good job squeezing out these wins. Teams that you probably should blow out, I would imagine, but they've done a good job squeezing out these 3 wins to start the year.
Part of me feels like knowing that your team is capable of, squeaking out some wins and even against opponents that you wouldn't necessarily call high-level Division I opponents. It's good to know as a coach and as a fan that your team's capable of bouncing back and at least winning, because in previous years, IU's down that big, down 17 in the fourth quarter, they just get steamrolled to the end.
Now, Jake, what happens when you start to play those high-level teams?
It's a good question, because the Hoosiers travel to Cincinnati next week to probably lose in convincing fashion. With that being said, let's move on. Let's go to South Bend, actually. The Cal Golden Bears actually made the trip to a 2,000-mile trip to South Bend, take on the Fighting Irish, who are reeling from their loss to Marshall. Of course, QB Tyler Buckner out for the season. First play of the second quarter, zeros across the board. Buckner's backup Drew Pine fumbles the snap, recovered by Cal defender Oluwafemi Oladejo, which sets the Golden Bears up to score first. QB Jack Plummer, the transfer from your Boilermakers, finds J. Michael Sturdivant in the end zone from 30 yards out. 7-0 Bears. Moving on, 9 minutes to go in the half. Irish with possession. Pine steps up in the pocket and delivers a 25-yard strike to junior running back Chris Tyree for the touchdown to cap off the 10-play drive. Just over 9 to go in the third. Running back Ostrick Estemy dives forward for a touchdown after a few strong runs from himself leading up to that play, 14-10 Irish. Later on, 4:26 left in the third. Jack Plummer with the QB sneak to make it a 17-14 ball game. Cal goes up 10, and 9:20 left in the fourth. Drew Pine finding another tight end, Michael Mayer this time for the touchdown to make the score 24-17, which Notre Dame would eventually win by. Final play of the game here, Jack Plummer escapes pressure and fires a prayer down the field to the end zone, but to no avail. So Irish move on and get the win. A good quality win from Marcus Freeman.
How about that last Hail Mary? You just saw it on the screen. It was a very impressive throw, really put right where it needed to be, bounced between 4 or 5 different guys. At one point was like off the fingertips of Cal's receiver. Was basically everything you could have done if you're Plummer to put your team in position to get that Hail Mary win. Something we saw quite a bit throughout the weekend in both levels of football, but just not able to get it done there, and it was the first win for Marcus Freeman in this Notre Dame team.
Yeah, I think that Notre Dame's resilient. They'll recover. They'll always be one of the top teams in the NCAA, regardless of how you look at it. But yes, definitely a quality win to get them back on track and get them set up for the stronger part of their schedule.
Freeman's 4th game as head coach of the Irish. Of course, that goes back to the Fiesta Bowl last year. Just nice to see them get that first win after losing to Marshall, losing to Ohio State, able to finally get a win here. It's pretty nice to see if you're a Notre Dame fan.
Yeah, and let's take a look around the rest of Division I. Of course, Troy at Appalachian State was a big one. Of course, College game day in town at App State. And the big highlight from that one, quarterback Chase Bryce to Christian Horn on a Hail Mary, bounces off a defender's Horn, brings it in, and scores the game-winning touchdown.
So that's one we were just talking about, where you put the ball where it needs to be. It bounces off a couple guys, just like that Cal game, except this time it went App State's way, and I feel like everything is going to go Appalachian State's way this year. Lost their first game of the year. Now they've won 2 straight. Now they're kind of the darlings for college football. You mentioned how game day was at App State over the weekend, and it's just a team that everyone can rally around. And you see with that Hail Mary touchdown to beat Troy was a great start to the season.
Right, and I'm going to have to agree with you. Every year, college football fans find one team that they determine to, be their underdog that they root for.
Yeah.
This year, it's got to be App State. But I don't know, with wins in this fashion, how much longer they'll be considered underdogs.
That's a great point. And of course, last week when they defeated Texas A&M, kind of the general idea from everybody was, hey, this is not a crappy team. Like, App State can put together some good football, and we see it here as they defeat Troy at the end of the game. You kind of want to be ahead a little bit more than that at the end of a game against Troy, but they did a good job to get that win in an exciting fashion. That's really what's going to win the hearts of these college football fans, these exciting wins from App State.
Absolutely, and speaking of winning hearts, I'd be beside myself if I didn't mention that Washington beat Michigan State this past weekend. Former IU QB Michael Penix, now with the Washington Huskies, he has plenty of experience beating Michigan State. I say plenty, I guess only one time in his 4-year tenure at IU, but he threw for 397 yards and 4 touchdowns. You got to think that appearance or that showing might get him on some type of award watch list. You never know.
Let's shift gears. Let's move away from college football and let's go to NFL football. That's next here on Last Call.
Anybody can be a firefighter. Male, female, younger, older.
We have school teachers. We have leaders in business.
Is me, you, anyone that wants to be.
There is no typical firefighter.
Is there a danger hiding in your home? Unused opioid medicines could harm your family. Find your unused opioid pills, patches, or syrups and learn how to dispose of them safely at fda.gov/drug disposal.
Welcome back here. Last Call. Nathaniel, Finch with Jake Keefer. We just talked about UINDY Sports, college football. Now let's talk about professional football, the NFL. The Colts here in Indianapolis, they traveled to Jacksonville, a team that they have not been able to beat in quite a while. It's been since 2014 since they've beat Jacksonville on the road. And unfortunately, that streak is going to continue because they lost 24-0. Let's take a look at the highlights. Of course, that's if you can call these highlights. Not much going down in Duval County as the Colts just not able to get anything going, eventually losing 24-0. Much of this here throughout the rest of the game was just Matt Ryan throwing interceptions. Get rid of those highlights. There were none. The Colts could not get anything on tape, and just a big disappointment in Jacksonville, a team that you should beat.
Well, I think we have to move past Jacksonville being the redheaded stepchild, I guess.
They got the first overall pick the last 2 years.
I understand that, but I think that this defense is a legitimate defense. Now, granted, I don't want to hear anything from the let Matty Ice cook crowd. I don't think he has any of that left in the tank. He threw so many interceptions. There were just so many offensive mistakes for the Colts that I think the Jaguars capitalized on very well, and their offense really got going as well.
I love Frank Reich. Don't get me wrong. He's been one of my favorite coaches for the last few years. But dating back to a couple losses last year, there was the Bucs comeback, there was when the Patriots almost came back, and then when they lost to the Jaguars, Jonathan Taylor just did not get the ball nearly enough. And that was the same here. He was only 8 or 9 carries. He ended up doing pretty well with those carries, but when you don't feed the best running back in the NFL of football, you're not going to win a lot of games. You can't rely on Matty Ice and whoever you can pull off your practice squad because your top 2 receivers were hurt. You need to run the ball, especially against a team like this. You need to let the best, maybe one of the best players in the NFL feast, and they just didn't. They didn't the last few losses last year as well.
Yeah, it was just a tough showing all around. Defense didn't look good either. I mean, it really calls into question what, Frank Reich and Chris Ballard are really thinking about when it comes to drafting, when it comes to, just staffing the team, bringing players up from the practice squad, as you mentioned.
You've got guys like Michael Pittman and Alec Pierce, that is, who were both hurt this game. It's week 2, and you're already banged up as a team. That's definitely not where you want to be at this point in the season. Not much you can control in that regard, though. But the fact that they go throughout the offseason, you go through training camp, you go through preseason, you say, we've got Michael Pittman Jr. and we've got Alec Pierce, and we're happy with that at the receiver corps. We don't need to upgrade. We don't need to bring anybody in. We're happy with those two. They're down in week 2, and now it really makes you look like a fool throughout the whole offseason with all this capital that they have. I know Ballard keeps saying, oh, we got to pay our own guys. But you got to pay somebody to come in and make plays for you. And if you're not going to hand the ball to your running back, you need to have talent there for Matt Ryan to try to work with. They just haven't.
Absolutely. Speaking of needing talent to work with your quarterback, my Ravens really lost a close one to the Dolphins, Nathaniel, and I'm just going to let you handle this one because I don't see any point in it.
A great game at the Ravens. Let's take a look at that one from Baltimore. Let's take a look at the highlights. It started off pretty well, and heck, how about the start for Mike McDaniel, the head coach, new head coach here for this Dolphins team. It started off very well for the Ravens, though. It was Devin Duvernay. And what a start he had on this kickoff return. He's going to take it from a few yards deep into the end zone, but he's going to take it all the way to the other side of the field into the end zone for a 103-yard kickoff return. That's going to put the score 7-0 before any offensive plays are even played. What a start for Baltimore and Devin Duvernay, who, Jake, you mentioned as a sneaky fantasy pick. You see him running across the screen here. Not going to get the ball in this play. Instead, Rashad Bateman, one of the new receivers for this team in the last couple of years, a young buck who's running his way down for a 75-yard touchdown. That's going to bring the score 14-7 in the second quarter. Now let's shoot ahead to the third quarter. This time 28-7. Tua to Mike Gesicki, 14 yards for a touchdown. That's going to bring this game a little bit closer, but really dominated by the Ravens early throughout the first 3 quarters. Still, 28-14 now the score after Gesicki gets both feet in bounds at the end of that 14-yard touchdown. How about this? Lamar Jackson, the play of the day. He takes this one and, just like he always does, runs past everybody on defense. How about the speed of Lamar? Pay the man. Give him $280 million. Give him $300 million guaranteed if he wants. You need to give him what he deserves because...
Give him all of it.
Exactly. Give him all of it. That play with a lot of record-breaking significance. We'll get to that later. Here we've got 35-21. The comeback starting. Tyreek Hill open in the end zone. A bit underthrown, but does not matter. Put 6 more up on the board. What a throw from Tua Tagovailoa to Tyreek Hill. He's going to do it again right here. This time to tie the game up at 35. Tua wide open, streaking down the field. You've got a pair of track stars on your team at wideout, and there you see one of them feasting on this Ravens secondary, who's supposed to be one of the better ones in the league personnel-wise. And Tua just makes a great strike to tie this game up at 35. This was with about 5 minutes to go here in the fourth quarter. Then Lamar trying to get the team just in field goal range. It's a tie game, trying to get some points up on the board. They do so here with the automatic Justin Tucker from 51 away. Give him a 3-point lead with 2 minutes and 18 seconds to go. There's a flag on the play, but unnecessary for this time. Still now down by 3 are the Dolphins. Finding Tyreek Hill again, this time over the middle of the field, this time getting into field goal range, which if you kick a field goal from here, you tie the game up. That's not what they're thinking here. Chase Edmonds, 45 seconds to go, and he races to the sideline. How about this? All the way towards the boundary inside the 10 before he's brought down. They're going to let the clock roll all the way inside of 20 seconds. Now, with just a little bit time left on the clock, Tagovailoa, what a game he had. His sixth touchdown pass of the day. Gets the second one in the hands of Waddle there, who had himself a great day as well, 171 yards through the air, and the go-ahead score to give the Dolphins the win that they were looking for. Unfortunately, Jake, against your Ravens, not quite how you expected the game to go. It was a game of really a whole weekend of comebacks. We saw a lot of teams come back from those big deficits, and there the Dolphins just did a great job coming back from that 35-14 point deficit in the fourth quarter.
I mean, Tua, Tyreek, and Jalen Waddle all played out of their minds, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
They played very well, both Tyreek and Jalen with 11 receptions apiece, both over 170 yards receiving, both with 2 touchdowns. Yeah. 2 with 6 touchdowns. I think we also have to accept that that the Dolphins might be like the Jags in the sense that they stunk for so many years straight, but now they're getting back to being good.
Let's take a look now at Lamar Jackson. How impressive was he? Not only had 318 passing yards, he had 3 touchdowns, but 9 rushes, 119 yards and a touchdown. That gives him over 100 yards for the 11th time in his career, in only his 5-year career. That breaks a record for him. Now he is the only quarterback with over 10 100-yard rushing games at the quarterback position. Very impressive.
Yeah, and his career just started. I mean, pay the man. Pay the man, Shirley, please. That's what the Ravens need. I know that me personally as a fan, I don't care how much money you give. Give him $500 million. Give him a Patrick Mahomes deal. I mean, you got to lock him down for 8-10 years.
We're going to take a quick look at a few scores. It was the Bengals-Cowboys. Cowboys won that game 20-17. A big comeback for the Bengals, but they fell short. And then the Bucs and the Saints, they played. Tom Brady, notoriously 0-4 against the Saints in the regular season, finally gets his first win. 20-10 was that score. It was 3-3 in the fourth quarter, and they were able to come back and win that game in what was really a slow start for Brady, a frustrating start. Bit of a fight broke out. Not really a whole lot there. Let's go ahead and take a look at this fight here as Tom Brady kind of instigated a fight and got his teammate Mike Evans suspended. We'll just take a quick look here, but not really what you want if you're the Bucs, but you can't blame Evans, right?
No, I mean, any time that Marshawn Lattimore and Mike Evans are in the same place at the same time, something's bound to happen. Now, in this case, I think Mike Evans is in the right, standing up for his quarterback, just like Leonard Fournette did, and a couple offensive linemen as well. I mean, you got to have Tom Brady's back when he's in that situation.
Couple notable scores, some comebacks from this weekend, as we had mentioned earlier. Big weekend of comebacks in both NFL and college football, including for UIndy, like we mentioned. But the Jets came back 31-30, the win over the Browns in Cleveland. The debut.
Joe Flacco cooking.
He sure was, coming back from the grave. And of course, you being a Ravens fan, a big Joe Flacco guy. But how about this? They are the only team since 2001. That was the Bears back in 2001 that were able to come back from down 13 with 2 minutes to go. Had a great game, and really the Browns just a couple clock management issues. I know how that feels as a Broncos fan these last couple games. But a couple other scores. Cardinals got the big win, 29-23. Came back against the Raiders, took that overtime, scoop and score by Byron Murphy to win the game. Cardinals with a big win there. And then the Rams stopped the comeback bid. They were ahead 28-3 against the Falcons. Of course, that score very familiar between Falcons fans. But the Falcons started to come back, tried to get it done, and said final score there, 31-27. Let's step aside and take a quick break. Then we'll get right into Monday Night Football before we finish. Last call.
Yes.
Sorry, but before we start, you should know our terms and conditions.
I'm kind of in a rush.
You understand that by using the service, you may be exposed to content that is potentially dangerous, offensive, harmful to minors, unsafe, or otherwise objectionable, and you're using the service at your own risk.
What?
Let's go.
Ride-hail companies typically claim they aren't liable for their drivers. So read the fine print. Always ride responsibly.
Welcome back to Last Call. Jay Keefer alongside Nathaniel Finch and Sam Gailey. Preview some Monday Night Football games here. Titans at Bills. The spread's actually Bills -10, money lines at -460, over under 47.5. Sam, any picks there?
I definitely would try to diversify this pick by going Titans, but obviously with that Bills offense, it's just I think it's going to be too much. Stephon Diggs is going to run everywhere.
A -10 spread is huge for the Bills. Not a big fan of that. I'm going to take the Titans +10. I still think Bills are going to win the game, but 10 points is quite a bit for a Mike Vrabel-led team that has usually kept these matchups close with the Bills. I do like, however, the super boost. How about this on FanDuel? Josh Allen to pass for 200 yards, Derrick Henry to rush for 50 yards, Stephon Diggs to have 50 yards receiving. That's a +125. That is easy money. I'm putting a lot on that for sure.
Taking the juice. Now previewing the Vikings versus the Eagles. You called it. You said that the Eagles are probably favored by a field goal, and they are -2.5. Over-under set at 48.5. I think that's a little too high for me. I'm not touching that one. How about you, Sam?
It's a very difficult call right here. I think I'm going to take the Vikings tonight with Dalvin Cook. They need to get Adam Thielen back involved after his past performance of 3 receptions with 36 yards. I think they need to diversify what they do with the football.
Vikings money line +126. I like that. I'll take the underdogs. I'll take the Vikings for this game.
I'll take the Vikings as well. I'll also take the super boost. That's for sure. Well, thank you all so much for joining us on Last Call. Jay Keefer alongside Nathaniel Finch and Sam Gailey telling you to have a wonderful night.